Oh my God, the Vikings keep on rolling a thrashing of the Houston Texans. We have so much to break down about it. Welcome to Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. My hashtag everydayers who have been here, and I am going to guess there are a lot of other people here because excitement around the Vikings is at an all-time high. We have so much to talk about. So thank you so much for hanging out. If you like this show, you can find it Monday through Friday, anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings. If you listen to podcasts, by the way, on SiriusXM, on the SXM app, you can also find live broadcasts of all Vikings games just by searching out Vikings on the SXM app. You can also find the show on YouTube or on Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, we're recapping the Vikings' 34-7 absolute drumming of the Houston Texans in US Bank Stadium in their fresh and clean throwback jerseys. And if you are watching on YouTube, I've got one on right now. I also am coming to you from an undisclosed location, a bunker. Don't ask, don't tell about it. And let's instead focus on why this happened. There are so many, I think, little moments in this game that feel like the tipping point where the Vikings really start to snowball. And I guess the one that sticks out to me, it actually happens kind of early, where the Texans had gotten two drives across midfield. They got one to respond to the first Vikings touchdown, which was a scramble drill to Justin Jefferson. The Texans drive the ball into kicking range and miss the kick. It was like a 52-yarder. It was no gimme, but it goes just a scotch wide right. And the Vikings actually take over, and then they go score again, so it's 14-0. It's this huge swing, right? And that, I think, kind of sets the tone for, okay, this is a game the Texans are going to be chasing the entire time, right? But how many times have we seen the Vikings get into that situation and let them chase it and let them come back? Not this time. The Vikings later let the Texans get back into field goal range where it feels like, okay, one score there, it's 7-14, and yeah, you're still leading, but it's a game now. And it's 3rd and 4. And the crowd is going absolutely nuts. False start on the Texans. And the crowd, I think, realizes that it was kind of because of them. And they go even more nuts. And another false start. And then a third false start. All of this brought the energy in that stadium. And a lot of you listeners were there to just, it's like the building's going to shake down, right? And then on top of that, on the ensuing 3rd and 19, we got 15 yards of crowd noise false start penalties. And then on the 3rd and 19 afterwards, they get an illegal motion anyways, and which gets declined because the Vikings got the stop, and they would end up punting on that one. Even though they were in they were on the 30, they were in you should make this most of the time field goal range, and they weren't even close enough to try by the end of it. And that's such a key moment to me early in this game where that was your chance, Houston, to stop this from getting out of control. And it was a total meltdown. I'm sure that Locked On Texans and Houston media everywhere is going to be livid about that sequence. That sequence, I think, again, kind of set an even more bleak tone for the Texans and a more easy breezy tone for the Vikings. But here's the thing I'll always say too about the crowd. If you were there Kevin O'Connell came up after the podium and echoed something similar. He said, I wish I could get every fan a game ball. Don't have the budget for that. So I think it costs him like thousands of dollars every time he gives out a game ball, and it comes out of his own pocket. So when you see him, like, everybody gets a game ball like he did after the 49ers game, like, that costs him like thousands of dollars to do that. So you can't do that at scale to the fans, but he said, every fan deserved one. And I think it's funny because my thing about this is always this. Sometimes you'll get these like super snooty, like grammar police people that get really mad when you say like we to refer to your favorite football team. Oh, we won, we lost. And I think if you've ever been to a game and you've ever made enough noise to cause any communication issue or just made for a loud third down, you contributed. And this is the extreme version of that, right? Like, if you cost the other team 5 yards just by being part of a thing that got loud, for me, you get to say we forever and ever and ever. And I'm never going to say a word to you about it. And so everybody who was at that game, that's like in triplicate, you get that. I don't know. That's always been my thing. Like, I think the fans do impact the game a little bit. And that's just the direct way too. Like, you could also make arguments for participation on social media and sending support that way, or, participating in like random fan events if you can't afford a ticket, but you went to something at the Mall of America, like whatever, right? I think you all get that, but that's the big snowball to me. And then it's just like a thrashing from there on out. And there's so many individual performances that are worth shouting out, including, I want to kind of go through the revenge game angle, but that doesn't really apply to Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold is the next thing to talk about here. 4 touchdown performance by Darnold, 181 yards, 4 touchdowns. He didn't even hit his yardage over. So it was a lot of, it's a lot of like short touchdowns, red zone stuff, but there were plenty of explosive plays there. And again, a very dialed in performance from Sam Darnold. When he wound up to throw, you knew someone was going to be open. More often than not, that someone was Justin Jefferson. It was, I got to check this. I got to check the tape and all that, and confirm this, but it looked like to me on the what I could see on TV that Derek Stingley was tasked with covering Justin Jefferson in single high structures. We talked about that in the crossover with Cody Davis, and I was incredulous that could even be an idea because nobody had tried that for 2 years, really. But Cody Davis said, no, they really like Stingley. They think he can do it, and they might actually do that. And I was like, no way, that's insane. That's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. There's no way they're that dumb. They might be that dumb. That's a bad idea. And I think seeing Jefferson pop off, especially on those crossing concepts, which can really stress middle of field close coverages, is when you get from one side of the field to the other, really hard to like switch those concepts off because you're going through a zone a lot of the time. And that's where a lot of like the really wide open Jefferson stuff came. I want to check that. But if that is the case, then I would say that's like a major reason that this game got so out of hand so quickly. And it felt worse than it was. It felt more brutal than it was. It was 14-0 at half, if I recall. But then the Vikings came out in the third quarter, and while the Texans did finally get on the board and got their 7 points, the Vikings still outscored them, and I think it was 24-7 by the time you got to the fourth quarter. They scored 10 more points by the end of the game, and it just sort of kept piling on. A receiving touchdown to Aaron Jones came in that first quarter. That was the second one of the first quarter. There was like a wheel concept to Jefferson, I think is where they wanted to go with it, and the linebacker, number 0, Al-Shair, was, I think that's his name, was actually covering Jefferson, which is a matchup you love, but he did a great job of kind of dropping back on that. And it was a pretty, would have been a fairly risky throw. And so he just dumps it off to the running back and Aaron Jones does the rest. And then you have what could have been a great Naylor touchdown called back on what I thought was a not great OPI penalty. It was a slot fade. So when you have slot fade, you usually will have some kind of curl underneath it, and that's what Aaron Jones was running. You split out wide, and you run this little curl, and you're never going to throw to it. It's just there to pin a guy just to make a corner stay there so that you can get whatever else you want in the coverage. And then Jalen Naylor is going to run a little fade sort of wheel route type pattern. He's a deep ball. In this case, Aaron Jones kind of bumped the corner that was covering Naylor, and Naylor was wide open, and it was a runaway touchdown. But it was, I guess he bumped him a little bit. It looked a little bit too intentional. I think that the receiver has a right to get to the spot he's supposed to get to and sit down. And there was no extension. It didn't seem like to me that there was any like super flagrant thing, but they called it. Didn't matter. Naylor got in the end zone later, and then they finished it with an absolute rifle to Johnny Munt. Those are 4 Sam touchdowns, but a lot of former Vikings playing on the Texans and a lot of former Texans playing on the Vikings. So we gotta check in on revenge game watch. That was always going to be the big story of this one. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by DoorDash. When you are maybe a little bit dialed into the game, maybe you're a little locked in, perhaps, and then you start to feel a little hungry, you're not going to get up and miss half the third quarter making a run down the street for some takeout you got to wait for, and then you come back and then you miss 2 drives. No. You're never going to do that. Come on. That's what DoorDash is for on Sundays, to keep game days going and make it so that you don't have to tear your eyeballs away from the Sam Darnold the experience. You don't have to miss a moment of it. You can have DoorDash bring your meal directly to you. And it's not just for game day snacks, right? It's for if you're in a particularly busy moment in work. If you're in the middle of cooking, you need them to grab you something from the grocery store. DoorDash can do that for you as well. And also just for like getting to know some restaurants in your area that you may not have crossed paths with. Maybe you never go down that street, but you can find that kind of thing through DoorDash as well. Right now, if you use code LOCKEDFALL24 when you download the app, you can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. It's a limited time offer and terms apply, and the promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. You must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. Continuing on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. When you're done here, go check out the new and improved Locked On NFL. If you like something a little spicier in the morning, you can go get a shot of espresso with Tyler Rowland. You can find me there Wednesday mornings with him, debating probably about Caleb Williams. And you can also get something a little more chill in the evening with Tony Wiggins at the barbershop. So we got to update everybody on these revenge games. There were so many revenge game angles on this. Danielle Hunter on the Texans, Stephon Diggs on the Texans, Cam Akers on the Texans getting the start with Joe Mixon out and Dameon Pierce out. So as RB3, he was getting the start. He ended up getting the only touchdown the Texans scored all game. And then on the other side, Jonathan Grenard, who probably headlines this because he got 3 sacks. You also had a revenge game angle with Kamu Grugier-Hill, who gets the start as Ivan Pace ends up missing this game. He says he's going to be okay. He's targeting Lambeau. It feels like a lot of players who are out right now in Addison, in Pace, are targeting a Lambeau return. As well as there was one other one who's, I'm completely blanking. You're all going to yell at me. Go ahead and yell at me about it. But you also had Shaq Griffin. He was a former Texan for a second. I totally forgot about that when we were talking revenge game angles on the crossover. So of all of these revenge games, the real headliner is Blake Cashman. Oh my God, how could I have forgotten Blake Cashman? The real headliner though is Jonathan Grenard, who gets 3 sacks. And this is another moment where I feel like the Texans made a bad choice and the Vikings were well enough equipped to punish it. So at least one of them came straight up 1v1 on a tight end. And that'll only happen if you're in a 6-man protection and you want to slide away from that guy. You're sliding toward whoever was on the other side. That might have been like Van Ginkel. That might have been Patrick Jones. But like, why would you slide toward that guy, right? And that might just have had to do with like the numbers game, but being in that protection is precisely what the Vikings wanted. So what I want to do is I want to go look back at that, and we'll circle back to all these things on Wednesday when I actually get a chance to watch the film. But when you're like, depending on what the Vikings defense was in formation wise, they might have forced that. But if you see an overload on one side, this is a very common tactic, is you've got your premier edge rusher, which is John Grenard, and then you kind of put him on one side and you overload the other side with threats because you want them to force the protection over there and you get a one-on-one for your really good dude. It's not unlike putting your really good receiver on the backside of trips, like Packers Devontae Adams style a couple years ago. You get 3 receivers over there, make the whole defense pay attention to that, and you can get a really clean, solid one-on-one for your good guy. So this is where the Texans, I think, depart from normal, because the normal response to that would be like some kind of half slide that way, but you'd still have a man-to-man side. You'd still have some kind of chip. You can still put help on your man-to-man side. You just have to commit that resource, right? What the Texans do is a full slide. So in a half slide situation, especially if you're in 6-man protection, Grenard would have been doubled by the tackle and the tight end. Pretty hard to get through that. In this situation, that tackle blocks to his left, and Grenard comes off of that side, ends up one-on-one with the tight end, totally dusts him, sack. There's another situation where Grenard was on the interior and rushed one-on-one with a guard, sack. And this is the big Brian Flores thing. They did get an unblocked sack from Andrew Van Ginkel in the end of the first half, so they're still doing some of that. But last year, it felt like all of the pressure was coming from unblocked, schemed up pressures. And it's really hard to keep that up. That's a difficult thing to accomplish at all, let alone consistently. But so much of what the Vikings have done in terms of pressuring the quarterback has come from quality one-on-one opportunities and then winning them. Last year, Brian Flores was a coordinator who could not trust anyone but Daniil Hunter on his pass rush. This year, he's got a lot of guys he likes and a lot of guys he's willing to give a one-on-one opportunity to. Grenard's the big one. The third sack he got was mostly Harrison Phillips busting through. I think he busted up the center and kind of missing the tackle, and then Grenard was there for cleanup because it just took so long for Harrison Phillips to get shaken. So that's his sack. I would call that a 2.5 if it were me, but that's like in spirit. It's not how those things are charted. But like that's the key revenge game. And then the other big revenge game is Kamu Grugier-Hill, former Texan. Mostly I think of him as an Eagle, which is why I didn't even think about him as like a revenge game angle. But with Ivan Pace out, he gets the nod. So he starts the entire game. I don't think we saw any Brian Asamoah. And on the second play of the game, he gets an interception tipped by, again, Harrison Phillips. So his name has come up in a good way a couple times here. And a couple of other really cool plays, tackles out in the flat, that kind of stuff. So Kamu had a good game. But make no mistake, the Texans are stacked with a lot of good players. This is not like a moment where the Texans are suddenly fraudulent. They moved the ball pretty well. It's just that one ended in a bad field goal miss. One ended in they went backwards on all those penalties, and then they had like a sack thing where one happened. Like they had a lot of like punts from the 45-yard line, on 4th and 14, you couldn't even go for it, where they just stalled out at just the right time. So in a hypothetical situation where the Vikings met the Texans again, or a team as good as the Texans in like a playoff scenario, or Vikings Texans Super Bowl, like let's go crazy. There's a world where you go up, you run this game back, and the Texans do so much better. This wasn't their best day, but that doesn't mean that they weren't still a good team doing some good things sometimes. You had a couple of great moments for Stephon Diggs, finding a hole in the zone, getting upfield. I thought Cam Akers played well. I think on the other side of the ball, they got a ton of pressure on Darnold, and Darnold did a great job of erasing it to make it feel less bad. But it was like, I'm going to guess we're going to see like some pressure numbers that are going to be higher than you felt like it was, you know? And that's Will Anderson and that's Danielle Hunter. But at the end of the day, I think Danielle Hunter got 2 QB hits and like 2 tackles. He got a lot of pressure that other people cleaned up. The Vikings did give up some sacks, which is very classic Danielle Hunter. He would always do, he would always be the guy penetrating in the backfield, causing a problem. And then the finish would just come, the quarterback would run away and right into someone else's arms. And then that guy would get the stat. But otherwise, like a quiet day. And I think Will Anderson looked like the better player. They actually did move those guys around a little bit more than I was anticipating. They had Danielle Hunter on Brian O'Neill. And I do love that. O'Neill and Hunter went up against each other in training camp basically constantly every year until Darisaw came in and they decided to put Danielle Hunter over there to help him like learn. But seeing that in an actual in-game situation, I think it's cute. I think it's it matters now. But these guys know each other so well. And both Diggs and Hunter, I think, like the atmosphere was chummy. It was friendly. This was not the true like angry revenge game thing that I think you think about when you hear revenge game. The vibe was chummy. Diggs and Jefferson were swapping jerseys. Diggs actually had a bunch of very sweet things to say after the game about, seeing a couple old friends, like O'Neill, maybe Harrison Smith, like some of the people that are still around from when he was here. They had tribute videos for Diggs and Hunter on the stadium. Like it was a very cute, like homecoming more than it was like a revenge game. But if you want to tally up whose guys did better, you got to say the guy that got 3 sacks. The real question now, is any of this real? Are we hallucinating altogether? Maybe the other shoe's about to drop. Let's talk about sustainability and just how excited we're going to allow ourselves to get, because it's an exciting moment. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And FanDuel, and they've had the Vikings as underdogs in each of the last 2 games. The Vikings have beaten their spread by double digits every week. Every single week they've beaten their spread by double digits via FanDuel. Once again, they are going to Lambeau and they are 2-point underdogs, at least as of this recording. So if you want to hit that or just hit, a Vikings money line and not have to worry about it or whatever it is you want to hit, put down $5 on that. If you're new to FanDuel, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Everybody who signs up at FanDuel for the first time and places their first $5 bet on whatever it is, you don't have to win that bet. You can throw it down on anything. Vikings Super Bowl odds, who cares? You will get $200 in bonus bets that you can really get started and start working with. So once again, that is FanDuel.com. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's time to have the hard conversation. When's the other shoe going to drop? Okay, here's the deal. I'm not bringing this up to like be the wet blanket on everybody. I'm bringing this up because I know that every single one of you has that voice in the back of their head asking that question. And we need to address that so that we can properly enjoy this without distraction from the angry little voice in the back of our head saying, but what's going to go wrong? How is it going to kill us this time? We don't want that. So there's kind of 2 ways to approach this. One is to ask, how real is this? The Vikings are 3-0, and you know when the last time they were 3-0 was? 2016. They started 5-0 that year and collapsed, ended up 8-8 and out of the playoffs. And you remember, if you were lucid during 2016, you remember the narrative of 2016 was, in that 5-0 start, was, oh my God, this is the most unsustainable thing we've all ever seen. It was like propelled by defensive touchdowns and like punt blocks and really fluky stuff that wasn't gonna that wasn't gonna keep going. And even just a couple years ago, 2022, 13-3, and all those 1-score wins, the same conversation happened. Is that sustainable to keep, winning one score games? And the answer was like, no, those games are still coin flips, right? But you could, at least in 2022, you could point to things they were sustainably doing well that, was going to at least keep them in games close, even as you had to like go on the road to Buffalo and stuff. And stuff they were doing right so that you knew they would be in every game. And then you had this situational master stuff and all that stuff. These games answer like every sustainability question you could ever ask. If 2016, you could ask, hey, is this all about like, unsustainable explosion out of like your defense and like big plays? And the answer for 2016 was yes. The answer in 2024, not really. They are winning the turnover battle, or at least keeping it tied. And that's good. But like how often you present the other team with turnover opportunities is in your control. That is sustainable. If you think about like turnover worthy plays, if you want to use a PFF stat or something like that. And the Vikings have been good at that. Even with Sam Darnold, who is typically, that's kind of the thing with him, is giving the other team a lot of opportunities for turnovers. But it's not like the Vikings are benefiting from like drop picks or anything like that. They're just being smart. Or it's not like their fumble luck. I think their fumble luck has been fairly average. You can check me on that. But I think their fumble luck has been average if I were to just like gut check it. So all of those aspects of luck are like, you can't just say, let's make the Vikings unlucky and see if they still win the games, both because that's not how that works. And also because probably because the other thing is, and that, unlike 2022, they're blowing teams out. They have entered, this is a stat from Vikes Insider pulled this from ESPN and their win probability charts. They have entered the fourth quarter with, at worst, a 93% chance to win these games. And that was San Francisco, where they had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter, and ESPN gave them a 93% chance to win it. These games have been absolutely no drama. And especially in close games, the sort of less controllable stuff starts to feel more important. We could have, if only that ball bounced our way, or that tip didn't, landed in Hawkinson's hands instead of the Chargers defender, right? Like all those little things start to feel like they loom very large. But these moments in these games, like in the 49ers game, that muffed punt the Vikings couldn't recover, that doesn't feel very important because we were pretty far ahead by then. And I look at a moment in this one, this very Sam Darnold-ish moment, where he's kind of getting hit on what should be like a swing pass, and it comes out backwards on him, and it one-hops to Brandon Powell. It's a live ball. It's a fumble. Brandon Powell knows this. He scoops it up right away. He's very urgent about it. Good job, Brandon Powell. And he actually jukes a guy and makes a positive play out of it. And that's that kind of thing that you would look at and say, oh my God, that's so unsustainable. They can't keep relying on that. Okay, overturn that one. Maybe they win 27-7. Like they killed them. They thrashed them. You can overturn all the luck and all the unsustainable stuff that you want, and the Vikings still have a cushion. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. So is this real? Yes. As much as we can understand that it is real with like the way that our brains process information in a very like Rene Descartes sense, as much as we can trust that, it's real. But the other question is, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop, right? And here's the reality. They're going to lose at some point, right? They're going to have a frustrating game. They might lose in the playoffs. Something like the NFL just doesn't let you be perfect all the time. Like it doesn't let you feel this way all the time. So enjoy these feelings while they last. The NFL will hit you in the face with a shovel. It's just how it works. It's not even a Vikings thing. That's just reality and truth. You pick to be a sports fan, you're going to get kicked in the nuts. If you want a potential thing that could be the other shoe, the thing that does put the wet blanket on all this, it's Sam Darnold's knee. So on I think it was ultimately a touchdown drive, Danielle Hunter, of all people, goes low on Sam Darnold and kind of wraps up his leg in an awkward way, not unlike the one Jordan Love suffered in week one, like angles wise. And he gets up kind of limping. He goes down. He goes off to the sideline. They check him out. Nick Mullins comes in for one play, hands the ball off, and then Sam Darnold goes back in, and everything continues as normal. And he plays well, by the way. Plays most of the second half on it, and he plays well. He says after the game, it feels good. It is listed officially as a knee, which, like, the way he got rolled up, it could have been ankle, it could have been knee, but it's listed as a knee. With the adrenaline of the game and potentially other assistance that I won't be specific about, you can finish the game even if you have like a minor thing in your knee. But maybe it's not smart to keep doing that, and the Vikings have to decide like what they want to do and just how severe that is. But a lot of those things heal on their own. You put a knee brace on for 2 weeks and you're chilling. We don't know what it is. So Darnold refused to answer anything on the podium about it, and that's smart of him. Like, he doesn't know. Nobody does. You've got to basically sleep on it, wake up, see what kind of swelling you're dealing with, see what you're dealing with, and depending on how that feels, then you get into the MRI machine, you get some better information, and you make a decision from there. The fact that he was not taken out of the news, and what we need now is to just be patient as that process. By the time you listen to this, you might know. Or by the time, by Tuesday, we'll probably have a much better idea for what we're working with in terms of Sam Darnold's knee. But yeah, non-zero chance you get the, hey, we had such a great game, and then the next day, the rug is pulled out from under you, and you find out that Sam Darnold's got to miss a couple weeks with a sprain or something like that. But we got to wait. It's fine. Now we turn to Packy, right? We'll get the crossover with Peter on Thursday. And on this show, we're going to spend a lot of time kind of marinating in this one and, watching the tape. We'll do Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. So get your questions in. You can fill out the Google form, which is in any show notes, or you can also send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. Anytime, about whatever, shoot me an email. I will see you all tomorrow, but don't let the fact that I ended on this little sour note stop you from enjoying the heck out of the fact that the Vikings took a Super Bowl contending Texans team, which even after watching this game, I absolutely feel that way about them, to the woodshed. And it's the second week in a row that they've taken a Super Bowl contending team to the woodshed. Enjoy that. Live in that. Marinate in that. Whatever comes tomorrow will come. And you don't get to speed it along. It's not going to come till tomorrow, so you might as well have some fun in the meantime. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.